Hi, everybody. I'm a raging papist, and today I'm joined by a special guest. This is Anti-Dem. Anti-Dem is a guy I've wanted to have on the channel for quite some time now. I've taken a real liking to his blog and to his sort of highway ruminations as he travels the country. You would ask all of you guys to check out his channel on that. Today's topic, though, is from one Catholic to another. One of the things I want to do on my channel is to, as I'm sure you all have heard, me being a raging papist, I like to get thoughts of faith. How do people come to know God? Why do they come to know God? Because spirituality is something that in the West is really frowned upon, I've found, especially in the post-Christian era. So incorporating all of that, Anti-Dem is willing to kind of share his story and his views on Catholicism, Christianity, Western spirituality, all of that. So, Anti-Dem, welcome.
Hey, glad to be here, and this promises to be much more edifying than my last interview, which was with Paging Rapist.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's easy to get those confused.
Yeah, well, that's why I went for a nice, easy one. Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. So I'll just go ahead and were you born Catholic or what were you? Talk a little bit about that. How did you come into the faith?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about that today because I actually was in church when I'm an hour or so late for the interview, and because I mixed up days, but I was over at church trying to go to confession, but ending up failing at that because I got there, and it's a church with a school attached to it, and today I think was Parents' Day over at the school. So normally this church that's in town, which is not the church I actually go to mass, because I go to a Latin mass. But
oh wow, so you're hardcore trad Cath.
I'm hardcore. Mine is an Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest Church, which basically, after SSPX got drummed out of the Catholic Church, more or less, the Institute of Christ the King is a group of priests who decided to say, okay, just how far traditional can we go and not get excommunicated? So that's pretty much what those guys are. And if you walk into church, you would not know that it wasn't 1962.
Wow.
It's even rare for a woman there to not be wearing a skirt or a dress because, that's serious traditionalism. But I'll go to confession at the local Catholic church here for a number of reasons, including the fact that the priest there tends to let me off lighter.
A good confessor, then, yes.
Yes, absolutely. But today was one of those days I get there, and there's people ahead of me, and I sat there for an hour, and only 3 people went in and out of the confession booth, and one of them had to have been in there for at least half an hour, easy.
Oh man, he had one black soul.
Well, yeah, because I'm sitting there, and I know it's an uncharitable thing to think, especially when I'm sitting in church. But I'm looking at the confession booth, what the hell did you do?
Right.
Who's in confession? What am I going to church with Walter White?
Right.
What's going on here? But I have talked to a couple of priests, and this has actually been borne out with my observation, because I've been looking since he mentioned this. It tends to be women who spend a long time in the confessional, and I think a lot of them sort of see it as cheap therapy.
Yeah.
Sitting there doing a therapy session, because for me, I'll sit down with a little notebook and write down all the things that I want to confess to before I go in. And I'll go in, it's like bang, boom, bam, 2 minutes in and out. So, and it sometimes makes me wonder, what am I doing something wrong?
Yeah.
But anyhow, so back to the thing you actually asked me about. All right, so I am ethnically just as big a mutt as you would like.
Yeah.
family roots all in the New York City area, which is where I grew up. So one each quarter of the family tree. So there's one that's solid Irish Catholic. My great-grandmother came over from County Cork. She was born in 1892. She immigrated in 1909. Had 4 daughters with a drunk who ended up leaving her. Worked as a maid, put all 4 daughters through Catholic school. You know, very traditional Irish Catholic Iron Lady matriarch. She ended up living to 104.
Wow.
So she died in 1996. So I have very clear memories of her. One quarter goes back in Brooklyn before the American Revolution. So far, we don't know what they are. And the other half of my family, my mother's half, my grandfather was Jewish from the Upper West Side of Manhattan, got drafted in World War II, went over to England, and he had always hated, when he was growing up, his mother made him play the clarinet. And, you know, he eventually grew into it, but when he was growing up, he always hated practicing. So one day in, 1943, he's sitting in his Quonset hut, having just gotten into England, not knowing, if they're going to send him up as a tail gunner in, some bombing mission over Germany. An officer comes into the hut, asks, "Who's playing that clarinet?" "Me, sir." "You come with me." And of course, his heart's pounding.
Sure.
He ends up being put into the swing band that went around to all of the Army Air Corps bases in England and played at dances. So
nice.
That's how he spent World War II. And because, guys would, really famous people would come over to play with them for the troops. So he got to play with, like, Tommy Dorsey. He got to play with Glenn Miller. All these, big, huge swing band stars.
Well, that was almost like the era of the big band. Like, so
yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. So he ended up meeting a Cockney English girl from East London, getting married, and my mom is their middle child. So religiously over there, it's a quarter Jewish, a quarter Anglican, then a quarter Catholic, and a quarter who the hell knows. So now my parents were typical baby boomer, drop out of all of that stuff. So the household I grew up in was, totally agnostic at best, and, politically at very least baby boomer leftish.
Yeah, so sort of a center leftist mentality.
Right. So of course I ended up being like this traditional Catholic thrown an altar. and what's weird is before she passed away, my younger sister actually ended up coming back to the Catholic Church on her own, completely independent of anything I did. So that's odd that both of us ended up doing that totally independent of each other.
And it certainly sort of strikes me as strange, almost, given your upbringing, that after sort of I'm just amazed you survived the sort of liberal indoctrination of the center left, baby boomer generation.
Well, it wasn't hard to see how flawed it was, and especially growing up in the 80s in sort of the Reagan era. If there's ever anything that'll be a positive experience, it'll drag you sort of rightish, it's remembering Ronald Reagan. And
sure.
I'm probably one of the very few people in the alt-right who has always been at least a mainstream conservative. Because you've got a lot of people who come out of some flavor of leftism, a lot of people who come out of libertarianism, and I've always been on the right to some degree. That's
something that I can empathize with to a T. I myself have always been on the right. I've always been when I was growing up, my family was always big R Republican. Now, obviously, when I was younger, that took on various forms. What does it mean to be a Republican? We won't get into that, but the general idea that, yeah, I didn't stumble. To me, the alt-right or the reactosphere, whatever you want to call us, right? We rightists. I came into this naturally. This was just an evolution of my thought, rather than, I've taken a pill, and now I'm here because I see the world for what it is.
Yeah, I came here the hard way instead of, Morpheus handing me the red pill too. And one thing too, you referenced the trip to Russia I did. So I went on a student exchange to Russia. I was over there, traveled around for about a month in the summer of 1990. And I will tell you, there is nothing in this world that will make you as much of an anti-communist as seeing communism up close and personal.
Yeah.
It was just, everything. One theory I've developed is that whatever it is that leftism promises to bring, it inevitably brings the exact opposite of it. And not only that does it fail to bring what it says it will, it's not just a matter of, we promised this and we didn't deliver. I mean, it actively delivers extremely effectively the exact total opposite. Where it promises to bring prosperity, it brings starvation. Where it promises to bring liberation, it brings oppression. Where it promises to bring advancement, it brings backwardness. Everything that it says it will bring, it will in fact bring the opposite.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? So that trip to Russia, was that your trip to Russia?
As opposed to whose?
Well, I wasn't certain if that was a story that you had heard from somebody and maybe you were transcribing it, or if.
No. I went over there myself, 16 years old, and let's see, I was only in Moscow for a couple of days. Then I went down to Sochi, where the Olympics are, and I actually still have a friend who works down there. I met him. He's a Russian. He was working in the little hotel I was staying in down there. And now he's like manager of this big hotel, and went through all this stuff of getting ready for the Olympics and all that. And he sends me all these pictures of Sochi now, and it's like, I can't even imagine how much it's changed since I was there.
Yeah.
It must be totally different. Let's see. I actually spent a week and a half in Donetsk, which is where they're now having that civil war in eastern Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it could get much more wrecked than it was when I saw it, because it was not a nice looking place. Yeah. Let's see, Kiev, what was then Leningrad, I was in for a while. I was in Crimea for a little bit. Really impressive, very, very nice people. I remember one other experience. We ended up outside another church, and this big, really, almost intimidating looking priest who had to have been like 6'5" or 6'6" comes out. And of course it's 1990. So we're out there, a couple of us Americans playing hacky sack. He comes over and we're ready to run away. And he starts playing hacky sack with us.
Yeah.
For like 10 minutes. It was all right, cool.
Nice.
But it's really different. I think it was Crimea. There was me and two other American students. So one who had some Russian ancestry and spoke Russian well enough to get by, and a black student. And there was this guy, obviously some manner of workman in sort of an overalls, and he was off working on something. And we noticed he's like staring at us. And, it gets a little uncomfortable. Finally, I think he realized that we were noticing him, and he came up to us and really apologetically and very nice, he said, I'm sorry, I don't mean to stare at you. I've just never seen a black person before.
Wow. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And he just sort of comes up, shakes hands, sort of looks him up and down, and says, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it makes sense for Soviet Russia. Just they wouldn't have those experiences.
No, not at all.
those little multicultural exchanges.
They had not experienced vibrancy. They had not been culturally enriched.
Not yet. So that's very interesting. So you survived your youth and you were able to maintain your Catholicism through that. Was there anything special about that time that bolstered you? Because I know of a great many people, especially in high school, for me, high school was in the around 2000, and I know that for us it was a very weird time for faith. And I went to a Catholic high school, and even then, my Catholic teachers were telling us like, oh, well, when Jesus multiplies the loaves and the fish, he's not actually doing a miracle. You see, what the point of that story is that all these people had all this food and they decided to share it.
There is a certain cohort of Christians who do this weird thing where they try and find, logical explanations for the miracles in the Bible.
Hmm.
And to me, that's literally the stupidest thing you can do. Because C.S. Lewis had it right. Jesus was either liar, lunatic, or Lord. You either buy the story or you don't.
Yeah.
If you don't believe it's an actual miracle, what's the point of believing in the story at all? What's the point of reading the story at all? Again, it's something else that Lewis said. If Christianity is true, it's of ultimate importance. If it's false, it's of no importance. The only thing it can't be of is moderate importance.
I like that.
So, if it's just a story about a bunch of people handing out, sharing their food at a public speech, well, okay, but that happens 1,000 times a year somewhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell's special about that?
Right.
It's just people being mildly nice to each other. Well, yeah. The world is not such a terrible place that's that rare an occurrence. And I've heard weird things like, explaining Jesus walking on water and all that, like, some scientific explanations. Why?
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. We all know that thing in, I think it's Book of Luke about, because you are lukewarm, I spit you out of my mouth. How I wish you were either hot or cold. Lukewarm faith, cuck faith is the worst of all. If you want to be an atheist, go be an atheist. Don't hang around trying to turn the Christian religion into, a book of stories about people being nice to each other.
Yeah, just some common sort of, almost like a secular humanist philosophy book.
Yeah, and again, why even bother?
Yeah.
What's the point? And if you want to defend secular humanism, then do it on its own grounds. Don't try and do it, by trying to say something about Christ. Because, again, if he was just a guy and a bunch of stuff happened, well, there are far better things to base a philosophy on than some guy.
Yeah.
The thing is, every religion has two parts. It has a cosmology and a philosophy. So the cosmology explains how the universe came to be, how the universe works, what the rules of it are. And the philosophy is how people should treat each other, within that universe. And that's important because without the cosmology, the philosophy doesn't make any sense.
Mm.
So leftism in total and secular humanism in total is in many ways an attempt to get rid of the cosmology of Christianity, but keep a bunch of its philosophy.
Yeah, I've certainly been advocating against. Although I do consider myself a secularist in the idea that I don't think that that the state needs to be mandating church attendance. Me being the big American, obviously, but I've always seen that secularism has the potential of being a Trojan horse, specifically for the death of culture and the sort of the decline of spirituality, because you are no longer you are politically trying to isolate a person from their faith. You're saying that you can have both of these and they are entirely independent. And so I do think that especially since after the Reagan era, that certainly did damage to us as a cultural people. I think that was when you started to really see the downfall of Protestantism. Now, from my position, obviously Protestantism it's a heresy, and I'm sure every heresy, a good heresy, lasts about 500 years. And in terms of that, Protestantism is its numbers coming up. So not to get crazy here, I know there's plenty of Protestants in the alt-right and people that like me, but that's just sort of my particular mindset about that. So I understand what you're saying with the way secular humanism divides. It's trying to separate that. I think that's just another part of secularism as a whole.
Well, a couple of things. Protestantism is part of a package of ideas that all sort of came up with the Whig Revolution that really got to prominence with the English Civil War. Mm-hmm. And then even more so through the Enlightenment.
Right.
And I don't know that those ideas, which include Protestantism, which include the revival of democracy, secularism, capitalism, globalism, I don't necessarily know that those are separable. And I have the feeling that once they go down, they're going to all go down together.
Mm. Sort of as products of the Enlightenment?
Yeah, more or less. For example, one of the things that I think Vladimir Putin is really doing right is I think he understood that Russia can't really be Russia without the Orthodox Church. Mm. It's got to have orthodoxy. So, honestly, I kind of doubt there's a sincerely religious bone in the man's body.
Oh, I would say absolutely not.
But I don't think that matters because, if he's going to be protector of the church, well, good enough for me. Mm-hmm. And the thing about secularism is I don't think that's really sustainable either. Mm-hmm. I don't think separation of church and state is sustainable. I think that there have to be gods of the polis, whether you're talking about some sort of national god or local gods or the Christian god. There must be gods of the polis. See, one of the things that I disagree about with anarchists is I think anarchism is basically impossible. I think humans have a need for some sort of government. And where they don't have one, that leaves a hole in their hearts, a hole in their existence that's shaped like a government, and into which they are going to pour something. The French Revolution technically got rid of government. They said, okay, we're anarchists now. We don't have a government. Oh, by the way, we're forming this committee of public safety, and it's going to be empowered to behead people. Well, if you have, and this is something you'll find if you talk to anarchists and you say, okay, oh, cool, anarchism. Okay, then I'm going to run a slave plantation and dump PCBs into the river and, all of this stuff. They're like, well, we won't let you do that. Well, who's we?
Right.
If you have a group of people who are going to use force or threat of force to make people who don't want to follow a set of rules that they've come up with, then guess what? You've got a government and you've got police. You can call them something else, but that's what they are.
Mm.
I think something similar is true of religion, and especially specifically of gods of the polis, where you don't officially have them, where you don't explicitly have them. That's going to leave a hole, and something is going to pour into it.
I completely agree.
And that something, I think in our case, is pathological altruism and a completely scientifically, philosophically, and spiritually unfounded belief in human equality, which is leading us right off a cliff.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem with societal atheism as a whole. Is part of the error that I see of atheism is that it's, and now I'm differentiating between cynicism or skepticism, which I don't see too much of a problem of. Obviously, if someone does not agree with me or does not see the faith the way I see it, that's fine. I have a problem with sort of the militant atheist that, in my mind, sort of stands against Western culture and against Western traditions when they attack the very notion of theism, something that all of man has had for all time around the world. Because I think that what atheism attacks is the very nature of people to seek something that speaks to their soul. That's why we've developed religions over time, and I hate saying post-Christian era, but that's what that's what the intelligentsia says. So within the post-Christian era, then people are not being catechized, people are not being exposed to traditional Western spirituality, which is Christianity. And so in its place, people are crying out for something spiritual, something that speaks to them, something that tells them right from wrong. And so they turn to feminism. So they turn to SJW philosophy to fill the need. Because if you look at SJWism, it is telling you that if you appease our God, your sins are forgiven. Your whiteness will be forgiven, or anything of that nature. So it's part of that whole postmodernity. I don't know. I'm getting off topic, but
well, part of it is that, especially when it comes to race, modern leftism really is the church without salvation. Mm-hmm. There is nothing you can do to make up for your white privilege.
Right.
And you can't even question it. The problem is we keep getting rid of more and more, stuff that disadvantages minorities, even when that stuff is actually stuff that reflects the reality of race and, average IQs and all of that kind of stuff. But every time we do, these, and let's call them what they are, conspiracy theories, like white privilege, like the patriarchy, like all of that. These are unquestioned and unquestionable conspiracy theories. You must subscribe to them, and they mark you with an original sin from which you can never get any salvation. But one thing that gets brought up here, have you ever heard of the Strauss-Howe generational theory?
No.
So the Strauss-Howe theory says that different sorts of generations come in cycles of 4. So you've got a high, an awakening, an unraveling, and a crisis generation that go in cycles. So the high generations are the ones where institutions are strong, people are true believers, people buy whatever it is that the zeitgeist tells them. Mm-hmm. Then you go into an awakening generation where people start questioning those kinds of things. An unraveling generation where the questioning that people did causes things to start really falling apart, and a crisis generation, and then start the cycle again. Well, the millennials are a high generation. They are true believers. I mean, in every kind of Eric Hoffer sense of that, they absolutely, unquestioningly swallow what the zeitgeist is, what's given to them in public schools, via television, especially in universities. They just drink it down like it was Kool-Aid. And we are going to need somebody to come by and start being a little cynical. You know, I'm part of Generation X, which was, you know, noted for its cynicism.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I don't think we even had quite enough. But, you know.
You guys with your MTV.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that you will find. You got to be a little careful. You know, debunkers often have their own agendas.
Mm-hmm.
And skeptics are often extremely selective in what they choose to be skeptical of.
Right.
You know, and there's also people who just kind of get into blind skepticism just to be edgy. You know, the man who sees through everything sees nothing. Yeah. But yeah, that's where I think we are, which is we've got a generation of true believers. They're just believing all the wrong things. Now, as to the idea of, you know, how much do you put up with people not believing in the gods of the polis? You know, my policy is pretty much what you do behind closed doors. And I mean that truly. You know, the problem is we got used to the gay rights movement coming along to us in the 80s and 90s and telling us, look, we just want sodomy decriminalized so that we can do what we want to do behind closed doors, and that's it.
Yeah, the unrelenting wave of progressivism, because now we know that that's not really what they wanted. Right.
Yeah, of course. That's the camel's nose in the tent.
Right.
But where that is genuinely true, okay, you know, I really don't have any desire to run a Stasi and to be, you know, peeking in people's windows and listening to their private phone calls. I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, once you bring it out into the public square, now we got a problem. So, you know, when you're parading down Main Street with a rainbow flag tattooed on your bare ass, well, now we've got a problem.
Right.
Same thing, you know, and this is not even Christian. This is anyone who's interested in maintaining a civilization. Socrates' idea about poets and playwrights was that they had to, everything they did had to be explicitly pro-social.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who produced anti-social works, who questioned the gods of the polis, who, you know, went past certain limits in, you know, denigrating the system that they had and all that, you know, march them out to the city gates, shake their hand, tell them you're a wonderful genius, you produce beautiful poetry, we cannot thank you enough for, you know, the genius and the artistic material you're bringing to the world. Now get the hell out and never come back. And he meant it. And, you know, there's something to be said for that. You cannot let people destroy your civilization. You know, it was Mr. Scientism who had a tweet a while back where he said, classical liberalism empowered professional civilization wreckers to thrive and has no means by which to purge them. And yeah, you know, you must have some mechanism by which professional civilization wreckers can be identified and, you know, purged, however that means. Whether that means, you know, take them out and put them against a wall, or put them in Chris Cantwell's helicopter, or, you know, do like Socrates and march them out to the city gate, shake their hand, and
give them a fond farewell. Yeah,
give them a fond farewell. You know, it's like the the episode of The Simpsons where the real Seymour Skinner comes back. In the end, they put him on a flatbed train car tied to a chair, have a parade for him, and wave goodbye as he's taken out of town.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd always like to get there's a lot of people that I'd like to, what's the expression, put them on a rail and just watch them go out of town.
Yeah, well, there was an episode of Little House on the Prairie once where there was somebody, some con man or something like that. And at the end of the episode, they literally ran him out of town with the whole town like walking behind him singing Onward Christian Soldier. He chased him out of town. It was like, sometimes you gotta.
Oh man, I wish our society had the balls to do that. Just
Yeah, well, that's something, there was a time in this country, and it extended to not all that long ago.
I know.
Where people who were agents of the federal government had to be careful what they did, because if they got the local population too mad at them, bad things were going to happen. I mean, if you look back at the early 19th century, it was not uncommon at all for government officials, especially tax officials, to end up heading out of town covered in tar and feathers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at the history of not to go all legal freak out, but in the early 1800s, the people were so desperate to fight federalism and the encroaching federal government that the state of Virginia actually placed a tax on banks, on federal banks, so that the state, whatever revenue came into the federal system, the state of Virginia would actually get money for it. Now, obviously, that was deemed unconstitutional, but yeah, there was a time when people would take that critical eye towards government and just be, or the federal system, whatever have you, just to say that's get out of our life. And it was good. It was positive, though. It was positive. It wasn't anarchical.
Yeah, if you read the Anti-Federalist papers, everything that the Anti-Federalists feared would happen has happened and more.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the Supreme Court. Right. If you were to tell the Founding Fathers that we'd end up with a panel of government lawyers, which is what they are.
Yeah.
That's what the Supreme Court is. There's nothing mystical about them. They're not priests. They're not angels. They're a panel of government lawyers in Hogwarts costumes. Mm-hmm. And if you were to tell them that we would end up where a panel of government lawyers, unelected, unaccountable, unremovable, has complete and total veto power over any and all of the people's laws made at any level of government, they'd be reaching for the muskets.
Yeah.
One of the last time, I think the last time I ever voted was in 1994. I voted for Proposition 187 here in California, which was the proposition to deny any kind of welfare benefits to illegal aliens. Mm-hmm. It passed by a handy margin and lasted for 6 months before some judge somewhere told us no.
Yeah, some probably appellate court just said that's unconstitutional. Yeah.
Yep. And here's the thing. The truth is, this country doesn't have a constitution because the unlimited power to interpret the Constitution is functionally identical to the unlimited power to rewrite the Constitution.
Right.
If it says anything you say it says, then your opinions, your prejudices, your agendas, what you want, that's the real Constitution, and that piece of paper is nothing.
Right. So we sort of exist to the whims of the masses, basically.
Well, part of
it.
Yeah. Well, among other things, democracy, it's not really a matter of the will of the people. It's the will of whichever clever sophists are best at manipulating 51% of the people.
Right.
What Lincoln left out of his little thing about, you can fool some of the people some of the time, you can fool all of the people some of the time. You can fool some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. Well, the problem is you don't have to. You just have to be able to fool enough of the people enough of the time.
Hmm. Yeah. So I guess to get back to your thoughts on Christianity specifically, what did you ever have a significant crisis of faith? And if so, what was that like?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
You know, when do I don't?
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's technically, I suppose that's a good thing because you should always be reflecting. But I guess when people are wrestling with God, how would you say that others should get through that?
Here's an interesting thing. If you haven't seen it, one of the Coen brothers' sort of more obscure movies is a movie called A Serious Man.
Mm.
And I wrote a big, long write-up about it on the blog. And the Coen brothers are Jewish, so it's a very Jewish movie, but I think it's also one that Christians and especially Catholics can find a lot to connect to. Where essentially the main character goes through a crisis and he asks for a sign from God. And my interpretation of the movie is that from the point that he asks for a sign from God, that signs actually surround him everywhere. That he gets sign after sign after sign from God, but he can't see them. He can't let them in. And part of it has to do that by trade he's a physics professor, so he's used to things that are mathematical, that are, you know, tangible in a very physical sense. And I don't think he ever asked himself, well, okay, if you did get a sign from God, what would it look like? Or what would you accept as a sign from God? Because if what you're looking for is something out of a Monty Python movie where, you know, the clouds part and a big hand comes down,
Yeah.
you know.
We all want that.
Yeah, we all want that, but not too many of us get that.
Right.
So the signs that you're going to get are likely to be a little bit more subtle and a little bit more mystical and metaphysical. So when you have that crisis and when you're looking for a sign, again, ask yourself, what is it that I would accept? What is it that I would take as a sign? And, you know, it's not going to be the big hand out of the cloud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can relate to that. I think many of us can relate to that because we're all waiting for the, yeah, when we have moments of doubt where we always have that one prayer that we just need, you know, like dear Lord, send me the best of waifus. You know, what you want is the clouds to part and this angel falls into your arms. But that's not how it happens. That's not the answer. Instead, maybe you find yourself on a trip somewhere and she sits next to you on the bus. You know, it's that sort of nature of you have no idea the time or the place, but you have to be open. You have to be looking in the places that you don't expect to look. So,
right. And,
yeah.
you know, God gives us things, but he doesn't, like, you know, shove it into our pocket.
Right.
He'll
He's
put
not
it
Santa.
down. Yeah. He'll put it down on the table in front of us, but we've still got to pick it up.
Mm.
And I think, you know, when people think of God as a father, and maybe it's something about where we are as a society, it's not in the sense of, you know, a 25-year-old father with a 2-year-old child. It's much more like the relationship that you will have with your father when he's 70 and you're 40. You know, he'll always be there for you. He'll help you out in a crisis, but he's not there to wipe your butt anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think too many people want the heavenly butt wiper.
Yeah, that's true. So, what? Give me give me some of your thoughts on the idea of what is it that you do you see anything that is intrinsically good about I guess this is a weird question, but what do you find is that is intrinsically good in Western Christianity or Christianity, Western traditions as a whole compared to the rest of the world? I guess what I'm kind of coming at it from the perspective of the sort of the atheism that has taken grip in Europe and the post-Christian era. How do we deal with that? Give me kind of some of your thoughts on it. I know that's a massive topic, but
Yeah, that is really massive.
that's massive. Yeah, we could do a whole nother podcast on that. But I mean,
Well,
well, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
one thing is the whole Sam Harris thing about, well, we're both, we're both atheists. I just believe in just one less religion than you do. Well, that's not really true.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from a very autistic rationalist point of view.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, I don't necessarily think all other religions are false per se. It's, the world is, the universe is not made up of a binary of true and false. That's computer thinking.
Mm.
That's totalism, which, John Derbyshire defined as no middle.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at something like, Buddhism or something like that, it is a striving to find the same thing that I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
It is an attempt to go in the right direction. I don't think it's pointed entirely in the right direction, but I don't think it's pointed 180 degrees in the wrong direction either.
Hmm.
I think that all religions that last, all spirituality that, I'll nail that down. All religions that last
mm-hmm.
end up similar in certain ways, because I do think they're all sort of marching towards the same star, or trying to.
How Jesuit of you.
Now, that said, that's not me being relativist to the degree of saying, well, it's all the same. Well, no, it's not all the same.
Right.
Now, as for Western Christianity, well, is it really Western Christianity? I mean, the thing is, Christianity is different. All right, so leftism claims to be multicultural, but remember that that leftism always delivers the exact opposite of what it claims to.
Right.
They complain about cultural imperialism, and then they lecture El Salvadorans about their abortion laws and Ugandans about how they should have gay marriage. Mm-hmm. As if that's not cultural imperialism. Right. As if going to these traditionalist places and ramming liberal modernity down their throat, either at gunpoint or at the point of, we'll use some globalist institution to wreck your country, as if that's not cultural imperialism.
Mm-hmm.
The end point of liberalism is everyone dressed the same in blue jeans and t-shirts, everyone watching the same Hollywood movies, everyone buying the same Coca-Cola, everyone believing the same political things, everyone having the same spiritual beliefs, which are these, basically atheist or at least atheist light, I'm spiritual but not religious, whatever the hell that means.
Right.
It's the end point of everyone will become like New York City, except, a couple of times a year you can wear your ancestors' traditional clothes out to some festival somewhere. Yeah. Whereas Christianity doesn't seek to replace cultures, it seeks to bind with them.
Right.
So if you want to see how that happens, I mean, just go down to some town in the South and go to the Baptist church in the white part of town and the Baptist church in the black part of town. Same denomination of the same religion in the same country in the same town, and the two services will be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So, Western Christianity is, Christianity plus the West. But from a purely Christian perspective, I don't think I could say that is intrinsically superior to any other expression of Christianity.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it also depends on how you're viewing the word Catholic. As the universal church. What are other, obviously Eastern Orthodoxy, Russian Orthodoxy are sister branches of Catholicism. We're all kind of one umbrella. What is Catholic? What does that mean? And to me, that's always meant the umbrella.
Well, I certainly never thought that I would be praying for African bishops to save our church from German bishops.
Right. Oh my God! Not to get off topic, but yeah, I was getting enraged when I listened to Millennial Woes just did a new video on what's going on in Cologne, and he did bring up Archbishop Chaput as a counterpoint, which is great because I actually had dinner with Chaput a couple years ago now, and that was before I was red pilled, so obviously nothing was going to come of that. But there are bishops in Germany that are completely harassing and demonizing their population, essentially because they're too Christian, because they're not tolerant enough, because they're clinging to their Germanness. And I'm like, that is completely antithetical to what I know of Christianity. So yeah, no, I hear you with the my God.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff in the Bible and in Christianity which limits the ability of people to walk all over us. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because we are in such a materially comfortable time that we forget how much our ancestors had to have the patience to endure a lot of what happened in their lives. And the Bible and a lot of other, Stoicism captured a lot of the same territory. Buddhism captures a lot of the same territory. It's how do you deal with the suffering inherent to the human condition? Mm-hmm. That bad things are going to happen to you, and you're just going to have to live through them. And maybe we've gotten so materially comfortable that we don't even really understand that anymore. And we take advice on how to deal with bad things that happen to you as some sort of like sign of weakness. Like, while you should persevere people walking all over you. You should persevere bad things happening and bad times occurring. Yeah. No, it's that, if you're living in reality, and in many ways modernity is not reality, bad things are going to happen to you.
Right.
And you are going to have to find some kind of way to get through them. So, yeah, there are, though, again, lots of controls. Even just the thing about he who will not work, let him also not eat. Mm-hmm. Well, how often do you hear that?
Never. Not now.
You'll hear all the time about, Jesus saving the adulteress from a stoning. But you don't remember that the last thing he says to her is, go and sin no more.
Right.
What he was saying is, no, don't literally torture this woman to death by breaking every bone in her body over it.
Right.
He wasn't saying adultery is okay.
Right.
It was, hey, I just saved you from this horrible fate. You better go think about this.
Yeah.
You go and sin no more. Or how we forget that Christian.
Sorry, go ahead.
Christian forgiveness is a process. and not doing the process makes it invalidated. It's a process of first comes repentance, then comes atonement, then and only then comes forgiveness.
Right.
You know, Jesus says if your brother sins 7 times a day, rebuke him 7 times a day. If he repents 7 times a day, forgive him 7 times a day. But it is literally a sin for us to forgive unrepented sin.
Right.
You know, you must repent. Which is why, you know, people who try to rationalize away homosexuality's conflict with Christianity, no, you cannot let unrepented sin off the hook.
Yeah.
You know, again, if they repent, hey, the history of Christianity is full of terrible sinners who became wonderful saints. You know, who was Saul of Tarsus? What was he all about? But, you know, we have to remember those controls on that keep Christian forgiveness and charity from turning us into suckers.
Well, yeah, I feel like this is almost traceable. At least I feel like it's traceable in my life. Because I remember even as early as the '90s, they were saying uh, they kept saying, "Oh, forgive and forget, forgive and forget." But that's a complete secular bastardization of the Christian interpretation of forgiveness. Obviously, you do not forget. The man committed this sin. He did this injustice to you. But you can forgive on the pretext of he will not do it anymore. And if he does it again, well, maybe I cannot forgive that, because you have proven that I should not have forgiven you. And I feel like that goes hand in hand with the whole, much like your salad bar, just the sort of the salad bar of Christianity in the West, which is I'll take the things that I like, I'll take the nice feel good things, and leave the other things, because forgiveness is hard. I mean, I don't actually want to hold his feet to the fire. I don't want to actually make him try and be a better life. I don't want to be judgmental. I don't want to look. I just want to forget the whole affair. So yeah, I forgive you. Go away. Is how I think a lot of people interpreted it then in the '90s, and now now we have Hillary Clinton's running mate saying your creed, my creed is the same. Just do all the good you can. That's all Christianity is. It's just that easy. Just do all the good.
Well, that's modernity's inability to tell the difference between being good and being nice.
Mm.
As comics fans put it, Batman is good. Batman is not nice.
Right.
If you want somebody who'll sit down and share a few laughs with you, the Joker's your guy.
Right.
Batman is not a bunch of laughs. So we have to understand very often Christianity is not nice, but it is always good.
Beautiful.
And the thing about, salad bar Christianity, that goes hand in hand with democracy and capitalism. We start out with Protestantism, which is basically everyone can be their own pope. Well, that ties into democracy, which is, well, if everyone can be their own pope, why can't everyone also be their own king?
Right.
And we end up with what we've got, which is, Burger King, have it your way. Well, if I can order my Whopper with, extra onions and no cheese and light pickles, well, why can't I have Christianity the way I want? Well, because it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Well, I think my brain's been pretty much picked from from where to head here.
And of course, as for Pope Francis, he's someone who only makes me ask, Doesn't the church have any big high stone towers with chains on the wall they can lock this fool up in anymore?
I just call him Pope Cuxus the First. Just yeah, I'm not a big fan of Francis.
He is the argument for dungeons.
Well, I just I mentioned this the other day. Just the idea that popes don't step down. Benedict suffered a bump on his head, and then somehow came to the realization, him and his entire cabinet, that oh well, I shouldn't be pope anymore. I bumped my head. I'm too old for this. And it's like, well, that's never stopped a pope before. You know, his age has never stopped him before. And when Benedict's whole mission was Europe and the West and reinvigorating Christian life there, and now you have Pope Francis, who is the Pope for non-Christians. It's just sort of astounding to me, the 180. I have to believe, and I know it's conspiracy, but I have to believe there was something shady that occurred there, that got Benedict to just step down so that we could replace him with his exact opposite. So
I would not be terribly surprised if there was more to this story than we know right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously, you know, people have told me, well, then why don't you become a Protestant if you don't like Rome? I'm like, well, that's, you know, just because I don't like the Pope doesn't make me a Protestant. You know, it doesn't matter even what Pope Francis says that I may emphatically disagree with. He cannot stop me from being Catholic, unless of course I'm excommunicated. But I guess that'd be a problem. So,
and if I went any other direction at all, it would be Orthodox, not Protestant.
I agree, yeah.
Because, you know, the Orthodox, there's a split over a couple of matters, but their pedigree is pretty impeccable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I suppose if I had to be anything, I'd probably become I don't know, maybe a pagan LARPer. Maybe that'd be good.
Yeah, that'll be great. The West will be saved by a male version of Wicca.
At some point I need to discuss the issue of paganism in the alt-right and where it's going and what its purposes is. But this doesn't have to be that conversation. But maybe a future time.
We'll just say, you know, there are certain people in the alt-right who spent too much time looking at Molly Hatchet album covers.
Well, I love pagan. See, the thing is, I feel dirty because I love pagan metal. Like, so I mean, you know, you have Sabaton, and there's a lot of good bands out there, and I'm just like, and when you look at the lyrics and when you look at the commenters, I'm like, oh man, why is a raging papist hanging out with these people? But yeah.
Don't worry, we'll dance around the maypole. It'll be like the safety dance. It'll be fine.
It'll be beautiful. It'll be beautiful. Absolutely. Valkyries will come down. Anyway, well, this has been an extraordinary conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there any comment left that you'd like to say either to the chat or about Catholicism, or wrap things up?
No, I think that pretty much does it.
Okay.
There is one more thing. I'm gonna end with an anime recommendation.
That sounds good.
If you have not seen it, a anime movie called Wings of Oniamise, Honneamise. It was done by Gainax, the people who eventually went on to do Evangelion, but it was a different director from Evangelion. It's a really unusual and I think very affecting take on finding faith.
Interesting.
So, you know, certainly you, RP, watch it when you can and let me know what you think of it.
Okay. All right, I'll look it up. I normally stick to Berserk, Claymore, and Black Lagoon, but those are all like super edge. So,
what? No Everyday Life with Monster Girls?
No, I keep my waifus and monster girls separate.
Hey,
And I
Spider waifu is best waifu.
that's true. And in fact, you have some fans here in the chat that are commenting that you have the best of waifus.
Well, my own waifu, I'm in the Kikuko Inoue fan club, so it'd be either Belldandy or Mizuho Kazami for me. So,
No dandy, of course.
oh, sure. I mean, look, just because I have 3 Belldandy wall scrolls up in my room does not mean I'm obsessed.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming out, and thanks everyone for listening. I'm Raging Papist, chatting with Anti-Dem here on not so much his conversion, but his thoughts on the significance and the importance of Catholicism, Western spirituality, Christianity, all of that nature. Very broad topic, but a very enlightening, fruitful discussion, I think. So,
I was glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you all again soon.
Bye now.
Bye bye.